All right, welcome back to Comp 229, Web Application Development. And it's week 8, part 1 of our video series, Getting Started with Angular. So this is an exciting part. We're moving away from just doing the back end and we're moving to with Angular. And why it's going to help us learn. First, we want to start off with Angular. Let's get into this right now. So first, we want to start off with Angular itself. So here's where you get Angular. You start off with, if you go to angular.io, and if you click on Getting Started, then you're going to see a bunch of documentation and resources. Okay, that's what this page is. It talks about how to get started with Angular. If you click on the Getting Started page, it talks about how to install Angular, and that's our first step. npm install -g angular/CLI. Let's do that now. I'm working with a project that we're continuing from the last time. I've copied week 6 into week 8. So everything that we had in week 6, now we've moved into week 8. And I've put it up inside of a Visual Studio shell. There we go. And I'm going to do that installation step. So again, it's npm install @angular/CLI and then press enter. If you're running a Mac or Linux machine, just like before, what this will do is probably make you do a sudo command unless you use Homebrew for Mac for Node. And the same thing for Linux, actually. You can use Homebrew for Linux as well. Okay, so we've installed, at this point, Angular CLI. That's the first part. And a lot of stuff we do is through the command line interface. That's what CLI is. I'm going to clear the screen. And then, just going back to that page, you can see that we're going to scaffold out this new app. We can use the ng stands for Angular, short form, new, which is the directive, and then the name of the app. That's basic. However, we want to install our app strategically inside of our workspace, so that way we can use it later on and combine it with what we already have on the back end with Express. So, let's go to Angular ng new. The ng new command is what we're going to be using, and you can see it, you can get it from CLI/new. That's where it is. It talks about all the commands for the command line interface. So what we're going to do is, the main thing is the name of the project or workspace. So it'll be something like ng new and the name of the project or workspace and a bunch of options. We're going to use some of these options when we do the ng new command. Okay. So we're going to go through some of them. Commit is equal to true. Initial get repository commit information. I'm not going to do a get repository, so we're not going to do that. We're actually going to scroll down to the first change that we're going to make, which is as we move down all the way down to here, routing is equal to true. This is the first part. I'm going to include Angular routing in our initial build. So again, I'm just going to flip back here. And we're going to start typing. I'm going to put this project inside of a workspace called Bookstore, all right, which is different than your PowerPoint slides. So again, ng new, and then the name of the new project, Bookstore. So we're going to sell books now, and then it's like it says here, -- routing is equal to true. So we're going to have our Angular route on the front end. And then it's going to continue to some other things. Skip tests is a good one. We don't want any kind of tests in this one. I'm not looking for a test framework right now. So that's kind of out of scope for this course. So -- skip tests is equal to true. -- skip tests is equal to true. And then -- style is equal to CSS. We could use SCSS or Sass, which is a kind of superpowered way of using CSS, but we're not going to go there. Again, that's outside of the scope of this course. We're just going to go style is equal to CSS. So -- style is equal to CSS. Okay, cool. And that should be most of it. Now we want to do a few skippings. Skip get. I don't want to have a Git repository that's inside there. So -- skip Git. And that's equal to true. You don't have to put the true And then I also want to, so I've skipped tests, minus my style, and skip get. Those are the things, my options. And that's the final option for the bookstore. Just take note of that. And then I want to press enter. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a new bookstore folder, and it's going to install all the packages that Angular requires to get going inside that folder. Let's wait to see when that's done. It takes a few minutes to get it done. There's a lot of packages. What you're going to notice is that the Angular new command will actually install something like upwards of 400 megabytes of data that's inside of here. Lots and lots of data inside here. And this is the space we're going to be working within, bookstore. Okay? But to make it nice, instead of calling it bookstore, we're going to rename this folder because we already have server, we have public, we have node modules. We're going to rename this thing to client. There we go. Now, why did I do that? As opposed to just, naming it client anywhere. Why did I bother calling it bookstore? Because inside this folder, it actually is going to name things in the correct manner, right? So for example, our work is going to happen inside the SRC folder, the source folder, and inside the app folder. So source, app, and if I look at the app module, then we're going to start seeing the keyword bookstore all over the place. For example, app component, right, as an example, and my app.html, this is where we're going to have remnants of that idea of having a bookstore. All right, so that's why I called it bookstore. We don't have to. We can call it whatever you want at the end of the day. But I just did that. That's where it's going to be. Assets is empty right now. Notice that Angular just put in a git keep command just to hold up with that folder. Again, we're just looking at the structure here. Environments. There is a production environment and a non-production environment. That's in here. And we also have a favicon by default. It's the Angular favicon. You can see that that's what's going to be on the top left corner of our website from now on. That's the default favicon. We never had that before. In fact, I can probably take that favicon and also include it inside the root of our folder so we don't get those favicon issues, right? Index.html, this is where all the fun happens with Angular. Notice that we have strict support, and it says bookstore here. It has support for, just like we've done before, with mobile devices and different widths. And then we have this new selector, app root. App root is where our project is going to live. So I want you to think about this index.html inside of our SRC folder, right here, as the manifest for everything else. Everything is going to be tied into this index.html file. So we're going to inject stuff right inside this area right here. That's where it's all going to go. Okay. Notice our base. You have this new base selector or base tag, and there's an href of /. This tells us that Angular, how Angular is going to work. Other things to note. We have our main.ts. We're not going to touch this. This is kind of a way of bootstrapping everything together. Okay. Some polyfills, just in case we need them for older browsers. We're not going to need those. A style.css, and overarching global styles if we want to use them. Any kind of tests that we want to put in place are here. So that is all in the SRC folder. We're going to be working heavily in the SRC folder for the remainder of semester. Okay, so this is where we're going to be. Okay. We also have an angular.json file. We're going to get into this in a few minutes. Our karma.config.js file, which is used for testing, where you can use the Karma framework for testing, although we're not going to do any testing in our course. Package.json is specifically for this package.json, not to be confused with this one out here, is specifically for this project that's inside the client folder. All right, so it's not going to be affecting the outside project in any way. And notice it has Angular inside there. If I wanted to install things like Bootstrap, I'd have to install it in this package, which I'm going to do. So that's our package.json. And node modules, notice the node modules in here, and there's also a node modules out here. Why? Because this node modules here refers to our server, right? So theoretically, I could have buried this in the server. And this node modules out here refers to our client, our front end, back end, right? So we have a separate structure altogether for Angular. We have a README file that's built in. It talks about what the project is about and talks about how to set things up. We have a couple of tsconfig.json files. Okay, one thing that we're not doing in our getting started with Angular is talking about TypeScript. If you want to know about TypeScript, again, please read the documentation provided for you so far on in this course. We're going to talk more about TypeScript. We're going to learn it as we go. So it's going to be like a just-in-time TypeScript kind of thing. And hopefully you learn a little bit about TypeScript in your Comp 125 course, which if you haven't, that's okay. We're still going to go over the basics that you need to get TypeScript going. Suffice to say that TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript that adds additional type annotations and support for tooling, which is what we're going to need for this bigger project. tsconfig.json basically talks about how to compile or transpile from TypeScript to JavaScript. And you can see that there are some configurations that are here. We're going to continue. Then there is the a bunch of different tsconfig apps. So tsconfig.app.json is just for one part of Angular. And then spec is for the testing framework. Okay, so these are different pieces. And again, they all link together. We're also using a TS linter, TypeScript linter. And what a linter does is it gives us hinting in terms of the way we want things to work in terms of style, structure, and a bunch of other things. Okay, so that's what the linting does. So that is our Angular framework in a nutshell. One thing that we didn't talk about too much was the E2E folder. And the E2E folder is where we have our testing folder. We can add additional tests. We can run tests on our source. Okay, we're not going to do that. All right, so that is the structure. One thing we want to start off with is we want to install some things. So in order for us to do that, we're going to go into client. You can see that this is where we're at, right? And we're going to do an npm install. I'm going to look at the package.json so you can see this. I want to npm install Bootstrap, Font Awesome, and jQuery, because those are the things that we need to make Bootstrap work. Remember, we're going to use Bootstrap on the front end anyway, because I want to make it look very similar to what we already have. So npm install Bootstrap at Fort Awesome dash font slash font awesome and free. And just to make sure that that's the same, we can look at our side-by-side. We can look at our package.json from ourselves out here, so we can see that this is the frame. We can actually also just pull this over and just do an npm install, but I don't recommend it. I think it's just do it like this. Bootstrap and Font Awesome is definitely something that we're going to use, as well as jQuery and popper.js. Okay, minus save. So here we're installing this on our front end side, okay? And don't worry about these warnings, we can ignore those. But that's what it's done. So it's kind of gone in here and installed as dependencies Bootstrap, jQuery, and popper.js. Okay, so that's what it's done. I also want support. And notice it says at Angular, at types node, Jasmine, and all this kind of stuff, similar to what we did earlier. We want to put that stuff back in. So we're going to say, just like we did here, right? And these at types, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to say npm install at types, and we want support for jQuery at types. We want support for Bootstrap. Okay, that's kind of those two things for sure. And then minus minus save minus dev. Okay, so that's kind of adding in some additional code hinting for us. All right, we're going to add more, but we're going to start with this. And in order for us to add additional structures into our application, as an example, we need to think about, again, we're going to do some of the same things we've done before in the past, but however, the structure is going to be changed, and we're going to be talking about this. All right, so if I go over to our src folder, and if I go scroll down, there is a file we want to go to, which is an angular.json file. Let's just put it over here, angular.json. The angular.json file basically is another system, if you will, that can kind of creates a schema or a structure for our entire application. All right, so this is kind of one of our core files that we don't want to mess around too much with if you don't know what you're doing. So if you scroll down, it talks about things like the out path. If I create a build folder, I can specify another folder. Instead of the distribution folder, it can go somewhere else. My index, my main index is src, the source index.html. My main.ts, if I go to main.ts here, this is our main driver file, if you will. This is the bootstrap that basically, I'm not saying bootstrap is in Twitter bootstrap, I'm talking about the thing that is the entry point for our application, if you will. Okay, so that's what this is. Polyfills tsconfig, it talks about what the default TypeScript configuration file is, right? So this is what this is. This is a configuration file of configuration files for all of Angular. Here, if you notice also, we have assets, favicon, and we also have the src assets folder, which there's nothing inside, just a git keep file. And these are our pathings, if you will. So the ability for us to search into different paths for different files. Because remember, we're not going to touch our index.html, this file here, at all. We're going to do everything by injecting it in there with Angular, right? That's how it works. So we need to kind of put together any pathing we need in terms of scripts, styles, and assets, and everything else in here. So notice that there's styles.css is our default styles, and scripts, we need to put some stuff in there in a second. So styles.css is going to be our overarching style sheet, all right? But we also want to include Twitter Bootstrap. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to node modules, and we're going to look at Bootstrap. And we're going to go into the distribution folder, and we're going to look at the CSS folder. And in here, this is where we actually have to look in here. It's bootstrap.min.css. But if you're not familiar with Bootstrap, again, here's Bootstrap, dist, CSS, and then it says bootstrap.min.css. So bootstrap.min.css. Okay. That's this one. Okay, so that's that first one. And then we want to add font awesome. So we're going to go back to where we were before, just like we've done, at fort awesome. So again, we're going to put a comma. This is an array of style sheets is what we're doing here. So node modules, and then it's at fort awesome / font awesome free / again, it's CSS, and then it's all, I believe, .min.css. Let me just confirm that by going there. So again, fort awesome, CSS, all .min.css. Make sure you put a comma here. Okay, good. And now that we have that, we have our 3 style sheets, one from Bootstrap, one from Font Awesome, and one from us, which is empty right now. Same thing we're going to do with our scripts, right? Same thing we're going to do with our scripts. So, and we're going to be selective with what we put here. Again, it's inside. If you look at the path, we're inside of our src folder, and then styles.css was kind of in our front part right here. So styles.css is right here. If we wanted to move this to something else, for example, a content folder, we could totally do that. We can make a folder. Let's do it now. All right, so we're going to say, so src, we're going to make content folder. So new folder, content. You can make whatever folders you want. This is your control, right? In our content folder. And let's say we want to move it into src/content/styles.css. That's totally fine. We can totally do that. And the same thing goes with scripts. We can have a scripts folder. So a new folder. We'll have a scripts folder. And this is kind of like outside of Angular. If I want to have an additional scripts folder like we had kind of in the front end, and we're going to need this for other little special effects we want to do. Especially if it's overarching, we can put any kind of scripts in here that we want that connect. Notice that it supports TypeScript files, so we can totally do that, and I'm going to do that with scripts. So the first one is we want to support node modules, and then jQuery, and then dist, and then it's jQuery.min.js, if I'm not wrong. So let's take a look at that and see if that's true. So again, we're going in here, and we're just assigning scripts in a row. This is what was going to show up. This is going to be injected into our index.html. That's why it's important we set this up now, before we get into the rest of it. So I'm just going to scroll down here so I can show you jQuery. You can see how many packages there are, a ton of them. And you're going to figure that this has been built up and evolved over the time that Angular has been around. Right, so jQuery.dist as an example, and then you can see that jQuery.min.js is right here, okay, followed up by node modules, and then we want to put Bootstrap. So Bootstrap, and then dist, and then JS, and then Bootstrap. .min.js. So that's that one. Followed by our own module, right? So let's suppose I want other scripts that are front-end scripts, nothing to do with control or anything to do with Angular, just our own front-end framework or client-side scripts that we're talking about here. That's what I would put in the scripts folder. And let's put that in there. We'll put in app.ts, new file. And let's talk about this and see how it works. So if I put a new file in here and I say app.ts, so that's what's going to go in here. Let's put in a bit of some structure. So we're going to put our iffy back, and we have to convert it. We will. This is really a immediately invoked function expression. Okay, and it's complaining because we have to put a space. That's what it wants. Linting again. And then we want to put a function, right, followed by curly braces, and that's what this looks like, okay? And it's going to complain. It's going to say, hey, non-arrow functions are forbidden, only arrow functions, quick fix. Take a look at this. So this is the other way to do it. So we're going to go here to quick fix, and it says we can disable the rule, or we can just make this an arrow function. So it's going to be like this. This is a linting issue. This is the same as kind of how we have it before, and it's looking for spacing, the proper spacing, and all that kind of stuff. It says file should end with a new line. Let's fix this. Is a linting issue. So let's fix auto fixable TS lint issues. We just did that. So this sets up this file nicely. All right. Now we're going to go function start. It's going to return void, and the void function is going to do a console log, just like we've done in the past. We're going to say app started. Okay, and notice it says, hey, there's a problem. what's the problem? It's not actually a problem, it's a linting issue. It wants single quotes instead of double quotes. Style. And it's all about that for Angular. They want you to make sure you code the same so that other developers that come in here, that's what linting is all about, they'll come up and say, hey, please change this. This does not conform to our style. Window.add event listener, and we want to access the start function on click. So on click, on load, I'll be okay. I want to go to the start function. That's what this is. And that's really our little script. And this is our test script to see if it's going to work. I'm going to save that. Doesn't automatically transpile this at all. Let's see if it works though. And in here, I'm going to put in, now remember, are we accessing a JS file or a TS file? Well, let's try the TS because it looks like they support TS everywhere else. And then if it doesn't, we'll know in a second. So we're going to go into src/scripts/ and then the name of our script, app.ts. Again, if there's a problem, it would come up. But we don't know if it's going to work. Okay. So that's our configuration, our first configurations. And what we want to do now is actually run this thing and this monster that we have here and see if it works. So to run it, control backtick, we need to be in the proper folder, in the client folder now, right? We're ignoring the backend for now, okay? And we're going to run ng serve -- option, open, and what -- open is going to do is going to open up a browser, our default browser, on port 4200. Let's try this out. So ng serve -- open, and if everything goes well and it compiles properly, now notice it's compiling. So it's going through, compiling all the scripts. If there was a problem with that little script we put in there, and we'll find out in a second, right? Because it's going to go through and try and compile everything. It's going to say cannot get as such, right? Cannot get. And let's take a look and see what the error is. It says a couple things, right? It says node modules, bootstrap, disk, CSS, bootstrap, min.css. It says module not found, error, can't resolve this problem with where it is, right? Node modules. Why? Where is node modules? Node modules is outside of the SRC folder, right? So that's why it's having a challenge finding that. It's not a big deal. It's a pathing problem, right? So that's the first thing. So we're going to go either, because again, we're searching from Angular JSON. And then notice where that is. We're inside of Angular.json is here, right? And it's looking here, but really it wants to go here. So there's a couple ways to do this. We could put a // and we can try that. So we can say node modules. Let's start with the styles. So it's // node modules. It's finding it, // node modules, right? And if that's not it, it'll be just a slash. Let's see if that works. Save. And when we save it, we have to rejig this one. Let's just reserve everything up and see if it compiles this time. No. You can see that this is an error, right? Remember, this is just a pathing problem. So it says a couple things. It says error, node modules, bootstrap. It's trying to find module not found. Can't resolve this. Look at the path too. It's client, SRC. It says in this. Can't resolve this. Week 8, client, SRC, content, styles. Module not found. Can't find this. Content, styles. SRC, content, styles.css. Where there isn't any styles.css there. It's actually inside of our folder right here. We never moved it. So let's put that inside where it's supposed to be. That was a mistake that we made. And let us do it again. So again, it compiled this time, but let's just see if that worked. And now we're good. Okay? So we had a couple problems, a couple hiccups, but now this is our default page. Hey, now that we kicked this off, can we see underneath, can we go to an inspect? And if I go to console, right, what I'm hoping is that we're going to see that Angular is running stuff. So notice it says scripts.js and it says unexpected token : so there's an error, but look, it has our scripts.js. Let's see what that looks like. So scripts.js, and it ran this thing, and then there's a colon, right? Void, as an example. It's having a problem trying to understand what this is, void, right? So did it convert or not, right? That's the challenge that we have to think about. Did it take our line? Did it convert our JS file, right? So scripts.js, it actually transpiled it to scripts.js, but there's some error. Let's see, let's go back into that file and see what that is. All right, so again, I'm going to go to scripts.app.js, the app.ts file. Here it is. Okay. And let's take a look and see what it's looking for in angular.js. So it's our source scripts app.ts is what we're putting in here. Remember we talked about this? And inside app.ts, we're saying the function start returns void. That's what we're saying. Okay, that's what the return type is. Anything after the colon is indicating the return type. This is fat arrow function for the iffy. That's what that is. But it's giving us a problem. If I go back to here, right, and if I go to the console, it says that on line 14 of our script, right here, it doesn't understand what that is. Okay? I'm just pointing this out to you guys so you can see what I'm talking about here. So did it transpile? The answer is it doesn't know, not really, because it kept void. And it doesn't know what that is when we transpile from JavaScript to TypeScript. So going back, then what we need to do is kind of change this back. We'll talk about other solutions here, but we'll change this back to app.js. Okay, we're going to change to app.js. And then inside of our angular.json, we're going to change this to app.js. Save that. And we're just going to wait for this. This is additional asset processing scripts webpack plugin. I'm just going to stop this from happening, and then we're just going to recompile one more time, and hopefully we won't get that error. Oh, well, there's going to be an error because we have void, and void doesn't belong. Void doesn't belong in a JavaScript project. Okay, cool. That compiled successfully. If I run it now, if I go to inspect, and I go to console, hey, look, there's app started. So we can actually have a client-side script in here as well, which is what I want to show you. Excellent. This is what we're looking for in this case, right? We want to be able to do this kind of work. So if I want to put anything inside of here, inside my client side, I can put some kind of script that I run, and I will need something in here eventually. Okay, potentially. So that's how the structure of Angular works. We haven't really done anything at this point. We've just scaffolded out a Angular project. In the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to get back, and we're going to start changing our project so it's more functional than what this is right now.